All right, I will begin today's session with a brief introduction. Welcome everyone to the IEA Bioenergy Webinar series hosted by the Canadian Institute of Forestry. My name is Ronnie Huang, and I'll be moderating today's session. So today is March 14th, 2017, and we are very pleased to have Lucas Kranz and Fabian Schaeffer, who will give a presentation on the European wood pellet market for small-scale heating. We also have Ole Olsen, Patrick Lemars, and Michael Wild, who are the co-authors of the study, online with us and will be available for the Q&A session. To start things off, Lucas Kranz has been working since 1999 for the Energy Economics Group, Technische Universität Wien. Lucas is currently working as a senior researcher and holds a PhD in energy economics. His research focuses on sustainable energy systems, specializing in buildings, bioenergy, scenario development, and optimization of policy instruments for renewable and efficient energy systems. He has been one of the Austrian representatives for the IEA Task 40 since 2009. Fabian Schaeffer has been working since 2012 for the Energy Economics Group, Technische Universität Wien, and has been one of the Austrian representatives for the IEA Task 40 since 2014. His PhD topic and research interests are focused on key technologies for the development of a bioeconomy as well as their market introduction and diffusion. With that, I will pass along to Lucas to start the presentation.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ronnie, for this kind introduction. I want to give a very brief introduction into the content of this presentation and on IEA Task 40 before I hand over to Fabian, who has done the work together with the co-authors. So, topic of this webinar is the European wood pellet market for small-scale heating. And the starting point was a little bit that we thought it would be interesting and important to understand, what drives pellet trade between different countries, which role do differences in pellet prices have on pellet trade, and this evolves in, I think, a quite interesting piece of work that we want to present and discuss today. The content of this webinar will be such that I will present very briefly the context of IEA Bioenergy Task 40, and then Fabian will start with an introduction into the heating market study, the background. He will also tell something about modern trade theory and how we link to this modern trade theory. One section will also deal with available data, with the methodology, of course, and then Fabian will present the results and conclusions. In the end of this webinar, we would like to go into a discussion with you in the Q&A session. The co-authors, Ole Olsen, Patrick Lammers, and Michael Wild, are also here and able to contribute to the discussion and answer your questions. So please feel free to write your questions in the chat box, and we will collect your questions during the webinar and try to answer them as much as possible in the end and the Q&A session. So, IEA Bioenergy Task 40 deals with sustainable biomass markets and international trade to support the bio-based economy. IEA Bioenergy has been running for quite a long period, and this current triennium, 2016 to 2018, is led by Martin Junginger and Peter Paul Schoenberg from Netherlands, and other country representatives are from Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Finland, Germany, Italy, Sweden, United Kingdom, and United States. What is the core objective of Task 40? The core objective is that we want to support the development of sustainable international markets and the international trade of biomass, recognizing the diversity in biomass resources and applications for bioenergy and biomaterials in the bio-based economy. So this is somehow our mission statement of Task 40, and what we really do is to develop market and different type of scientific studies on different type of bioenergy carriers. A special field of work covers accompanying the sustainability governance. There is currently an intertask project going on regarding the sustainability topic. Another intertask project deals with bioenergy success stories. And last but not least, we also want to contribute to the development, adaptation, and optimization of biomass logistics, leading towards high quality fuels and feedstocks and advanced logistics. So with this, I want to hand over to Fabian, and he will tell us more about the work and content of this study, the European wood pellet market for small-scale heating. Fabian, please.
Thank you, Lucas, and thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, dear audience, for your motivation to listen to today's webinar. We performed the study last year together with our Task 40 team members and published its summary on the IEA Task 40 homepage, which you can download. And meanwhile also submitted it to Energy Policy, an established research journal. I want to also welcome my colleagues from Task 40, Ulla Olsson from the Stockholm Environment Institute in Sweden, Patrick Lamas from the Idaho National Laboratory in the US, and Michael Wild from the Wild & Partner Pellet Trading LLC from Austria. As Lucas already said, they will also be available during the conclusions part and the question and answering session of the webinar. Okay, so international bioenergy trade did grow substantially in the last decades, and meanwhile wood pellets became a top traded bioenergy carrier. The EU is the main importer using pellets for power and heat, while 32% of global demand in 2014 was for heat in Italy, Germany, Sweden, Austria and France. Especially within the work of the IEA Task 40, many analyses on drivers and barriers for international trade, also of wood pellets, have been performed and published. However, the specific bilateral trade patterns have not been researched sufficiently so far. Therefore, we start with the question how bilateral trade of wood pellets is determined. If seasonality, residential wood pellet prices, exchange rates play a statistically significant role here. Subsequently, we discuss if wood pellets can be seen as a commodity and if the markets are integrated and efficient. I will now come shortly to the background, theory and data of our work. So the Pellets Atlas project was the first and so far also last project on wood pellets, which combined extensive data gathering, scientific research and a profound discussion with market actors back then in 2008. Richard Sekema and his colleagues found a relatively mature industrial pellet market compared to the non-industrial ones. The recommendation with regard to the data availability, namely the need to introduce a double bookkeeping system for pellet trade data in Eurostat, is furthermore what made our study we present today actually possible. My co-author, Ulla Olsson and his colleagues, furthermore analyzed the wood pellet prices time series and found an integrated market for Germany and Austria, but not for these countries with Sweden. Back then, the Eurostat data on actual wood pellet trade streams itself was not yet available. Then Christa Christoffel and her colleagues analyzed for the first time the relationship between prices and trade streams, finding no correlations for the trade from Austria to Italy. The discussion about wood pellet markets was carried on by having a closer look on the commodity status, finding that international trade is only one stepping stone in the commoditization process and to create efficient markets. My colleagues and me who performed this last study went on to analyze the commoditization process deeper. For this, we digged out more research about commoditization in general and found interesting theories, especially focusing on agricultural commodities and a relatively new scientific branch which analyzes commodity markets based on the theory of competitive spatial equilibrium. Two markets, that means, for example, two spatially distinct countries are in a competitive spatial equilibrium if their excess is transferred from one market to another and prices are equilibrated, not considering possibly relevant transfer costs. Barrett and Lee argued that actual and observed trade streams tell more about if markets are integrated, while co-moving prices can give information about how efficient these markets are integrated. They defined 6 different regimes, trade regimes, which can give you insights about the market status of your commodity, if arbitrage opportunities are efficiently cleared, and for example, if long-term contracts or information barriers are setting the scene in your discussed markets. Additionally to the advances in research, data availability for wood pellets made a big step in the last years by the introduction in the international trade in goods statistics from Eurostat. Since January 2012, they collect now monthly bilateral trade of wood pellets in quantitative, kilotons per month, and in value, so in euro per month. For the EU, inter-EU trade called arrivals and dispatches, and extra-EU trade alias imports and exports. This extensive but on 6 years limited data for the focus countries we further tried to explain using seasonality, exchange rates of countries not in the Eurozone, and the collected harmonized residential wood pellet prices of the focus countries since January 2012. The primary study was performed for 2012-2015. For the research paper, we updated the dataset until the end of 2016, which was not translated for some explanatory graph I want to show you now. Everybody still sees my presentation, I hope. So I will now give you some illustrative results and talk a bit closer about our methodologies before I round our findings up. Eurostat now provides a detailed view on actual trade patterns. On this slide you can see the over 4 years cumulated international trade to and between the focus countries, Austria, Germany, Italy, Sweden and France. I want to pause here and explain this graph a bit closer. For example, for the main importer Italy, here in the medium dark red, you can see that no medium dark red lines are going away from the Italian circular segment, which is this one. But a very colorful set of trade streams from other countries, especially here, the turquoise one from Austria are arriving at the Italian circular segment. This is also, by the way, the largest trade stream we considered in our study. We can also see that a strong bidirectional trade is going on between Germany and Austria. So again, a turquoise trade connection from the Austrian segment is going to the dark blue German one, and also a dark blue trade stream from the German segment to the Austrian one. Other important trade streams come from Russia to Sweden, as you can see in this dark red, from Romania to Austria and Italy in this lightest green, as well as from Canada and the US to Italy. The rest of the world comprises countries, especially Latvia and Croatia. What we were analyzing now was how single bilateral trade streams are behaving over time, if price differences are changing over time, and how these two time series behave to each other. Here you can see the arrivals to France from Germany in black and their contrary trade stream in gray. At the same time, we put into this graph the red line for French minus German prices, which indicates obviously changing price differences over time. Where these differences get positive, German pellets are cheaper than French pellets. What you can see is that here trade from Germany to France increased when price differences were more favorable for this specific trade. In the next colorful plot, the black line from before is exchanged with the golden part of all cumulated imports to France. Here you can see that imports to France in general appear to start in the summer of 2013, according to the Eurostat data, and definitely not only from Germany. However, we have to question if this Eurostat representation of the French imports is actually accurate. For the journal paper, we took the most interesting bilateral trade streams and tried to model them. You can actually see here in the first plot, having in mind that the vertical dotted lines are the Decembers of each year, the importance of the heating period for trade from Austria to Germany. And in the second plot, on the other hand, Italian traders filling up their storages with Austrian pellets during the warm months when prices are lower. In overall, we needed to model the different trade relations individually. We furthermore had to use strong statistical tools, namely autoregressive integrated moving average models of different levels with seasonal components to get behind the patterns of these trades. Also, the price time series exhibits seasonality, with prices being higher during the heating period, especially in colder winters. Important to notice the German and Austrian prices, which appear to follow each other. We see changing differences between the other countries on higher price levels. Austrian residential wood pellet prices are on the lowest level, followed by Germany, then France, and then Italy. Again, we use the price differences for the models to see if they add value as exogenous parameters. However, with no statistically significant correlations found for the discussed period. In a generic econometric assessment, we find that the trend of increasing trade led to some detectable patterns in trade, as well as some interactions between price differences and flows. However, it is not possible yet to compose a general econometric modeling framework for bilateral pellets trade. The reason is that the market-related properties of the wood pellets commodity are not sufficiently developed yet, and we definitely have still clear limitations in data availability and quality. Even though the price volatilities of wood pellets now are way lower than the fossil ones, we want to recommend here to support the development towards a competitive spatial equilibrium, which would then in further consequences also allow to model trade patterns. This could be done first of all through access to adequate information. We need a harmonized approach for collecting market relevant data, like prices, consumption, production, but also, for example, including stock monitoring. Also, more accurate and detailed output of statistical authorities is necessary. Then, new methodologies like data mining, web scraping or similar should also be discussed for academia here. Price benchmarks for internationally traded residential wood pellets have to be further developed. We saw last month the first futures contracts for residential wood pellets being traded. This could be a step into the right direction. How the financialization can contribute more exactly would have to be discussed also scientifically. And then there is the problem of fungibility or interchangeability of wood pellets. For some buyers, only regional pellets appear to be sustainable, and non-quality properties like the wood pellet color still play an important role. These public perception topics should also be analyzed in academia, maybe also by using new tools from the big data research. Furthermore, more possibilities to store pellets would increase the commodity status and efficiency of the residential wood pellet market. In the end, also a converged small, medium and large-scale market would improve the commodity status. However, the danger of pushing smaller producers out of the market would have to be mitigated somehow. Before we now open the webinar for the discussion with you, for which you can then use the chat window or dial in, I want to give the word to my colleagues Lukas, Ole, Patrick and Michael. At best in this order. Maybe you also want to add your personal lessons learned from this study, starting with a short description of your point of view.
Yeah, thanks, Fabian, for this presentation, for this overview of your work. What was maybe the most interesting thing for me to learn is that although we see a quite well-established pellets market, so obviously the data, the price data and the trade data that are available do not yet provide enough significance for real market integration and the high commoditization of this market, and the corresponding results were quite provided a quite high insight and quite interesting results for me. Maybe Ole, Patrick, Michael, you also want to add something? And by the way, I also want to invite everybody to add your questions in the Q&A box. I think it is open now again.
Yes, this is Michael Wild. If I may add a little bit of comments.
The leader has turned lecture off, and your line has been unmuted.
This is Michael Wild. I hope this is now broadcasted. Again, thank you for this presentation. And I mean, we had so many discussions in the process of coming up with this paper. I myself have been contributing to this from the point of view of a bioenergy and of a pellets trader. And when you're in day-to-day business for almost 15, not 20 years by now in pellets, you do not know how complex in reality the world of pellet trading is you're dealing in with, and how different the different levels of trading and product quantities and product qualities are. Only when you try to get this then into a model as Fabian did here, you realize what big differences there are between the different markets of 15 kilogram bagged markets, bulk market, household market, industrial market, and that these fungibilities or the interchangeability is by far not well developed. However, I mean, works like the one presented here, I think, are a crucial step towards a better development of the overall pellets market. Was it 15 years ago a purely over-the-counter market where the couple of pellet traders in Europe knew each other personally, and there was absolutely no tools for risk hedging? We see that step by step now with the one futures contract by Euronext, which was presented, and with other tools which are in development, more and more risk could be hedged, could be driven out of the individual trades. By this, definitely also eventually some of the costs could be mitigated and reduced, and all in all, I think the overall pellets market is moving in the right direction. By doing so, giving also more and more room now into modeling and into development in tools which are not necessarily connected with the physical trade of the pellets as such. And for this, I think the actual work was a very good contribution, a very good starting point. However, I do see it only as a starting point because there's really ample of work to be done until proper instruments are developed and completed, and until the pellets market is on a level playing field in terms of risk mitigation with many of the other energy carriers. So thank you, and I'm very much looking forward to continue this work, Fabian.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. This is Patrick Lammers. I also want to commend Fabian for excellent work and a great study. I learned a great deal in supporting this study as well, just as Michael Wild said. I think from the lab or the U.S. perspective, I think it was really interesting to see how the integration of I think moving forward, the U.S. being currently the largest exporter of particularly industrial or utility pellets, how moving forward an integration, a possible integration of the residential heating and larger utility market could move forward. Fungibility was an aspect, I think, that was mentioned already by Fabian, and again repeated by Michael. So whether the interchangeability of a pellet, if it's truly the same for quality, specifics, characterization, as well as sustainability criteria. And I think whether we can see that these markets, we see trade streams already happening directly to Italy or via Rotterdam or the Netherlands being shipped to Rotterdam by the U.S., but then transported by rail to Austria and Germany for the residential heating market, coming out of an oversupply currently out of the U.S. Whether that is something, a pattern that just continues, or if this is just something because we have an oversupply currently in the U.S. Production, or whether, yeah, these markets will be remaining separate for the foreseeable future. I think that would be a really interesting aspect for us to look into or discuss here. So I'd like to hear from people what they think about this.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you very much. Ole, do you have something to add?
I just want to reiterate the comment that Michael made, that it's crucial that when we try to do these analyses, using this quite a quantitative and a macro scale analysis, that we try to connect them to the real world and what's going on. And I think it's been very helpful for us in Task 40 to do this, because we have both the academic representation and the industry perspective. Because in the these kinds of analyses are being done all the time in more established energy markets like gas and coal and oil and electricity. So it's quite interesting to add this perspective, but I also think that we have obviously some challenges in terms of the data availability, which I think is one of the results from this study as well, but there's still some limit in terms of data. And of course, we have to limit our analysis of prices, for example, to the specific set of countries where that kind of data is available. So let's hope we progress with that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Ole. I will now go into the questions one by one from you, dear audience. So first, Marcel, what is this pellet price development in large-scale pellet combustion market, and do you see increasing prices in the future? So the whole study was on the small-scale market and on the heating market, but I think what we definitely learned, I didn't look into we didn't discuss in general if prices will go up. But what is more important to discuss and see is how this market is hedged. If prices goes up and down, well, that's something we cannot really talk too much about. But if there is some certain shock, if the shock can be mitigated, or if it's going to be seen in the entire market, here we see that the large-scale pellet market is already way better hedged and way better commercialized and commoditized than in the small-scale market. And we analyzed in our study how it's on the way of commoditization for a small-scale market. Then there was already discussion. Sorry?
No. I just would have been interested whether maybe Michael, Ole, or Patrick also want to add something on this question, or whether you have an additional aspect you want to bring in. As Fabian said, it was not directly the objective of this study, but still we discussed it also, and yeah. I mean,
if not, then we will go to the next question about the black pellet market or torrefied pellets. I think we have Michael Wild as the perfect expert, since he's from the International Torrefaction Council. Maybe you want to add something, Michael?
Yes, thank you for giving me the opportunity here. I mean, torrefied pellets, we have only in late autumn last year achieved the status of having a standardized product by the ISO technical specification 17225/8. So basically for a market and for an interchangeability in the market, you need a clear understanding of a product, you need a standardized product, and you need not only a standardized product, but also the market habits behind this product. And this definitely for torrefied pellets as such is only in development. So with torrefied product, I see the market at the moment in a stage where the whitewood pellet market was at the end of the 90s or beginning of this millennium. However, having said so, this can change very, very rapidly as torrefied pellets as such will not address the household market firstly, but will be addressing the industrial market mostly, so the power plants. So volumes can develop quite quickly, and then we will see also tools developed there. The potential for a general is this still working? Okay, so the potential for black pellets to form a commoditized market is higher than with the wood pellets, simply because the logistical costs are lower per gigajoule, therefore have a lower influence, and therefore the location of the producing plant is of less influence to the overall cost structure. Hence, the basic conditions for for the commodity status of a product is easier fulfilled by black pellets. Hope that helped a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Yes, that helped, I guess. The next question was about South America and be an interesting wood pellet supplier to the European market. Especially within the Task 40, we are discussing Brazil as a supplier. There is no large-scale wood pellet production and supply going on right now, but we are definitely looking into this. And theoretically, yes, it could be an interesting supplier for the European market. Then Ole was trying to...
Fabian, I'll just add a sentence to that. This is Patrick, if you allow.
Patrick.
So I think the supply out of South America, particularly ideal growing regions for plantations like eucalyptus in Brazil, they're already supplying vast volumes to the pulp and paper industry. I think they're technically a real interesting supply region, but we have seen that in the development of a global wood pellet market, these supply regions still kind of lack a sophisticated infrastructure to not only mobilize the resource in the field, but also then to turn it into an intermediate that can be shipped overseas. The U.S. Southeast in this regard has a tremendous advantage for having ideal growing conditions and already an infrastructure coming out of a traditional forestry sector, but with river and barge shipping, rail shipping opportunities to larger hubs and harbors like Baton Rouge in Louisiana, Mobile, Alabama, Savannah, Georgia, that these other regions not necessarily have.
Thank you, Patrick. So then there was the next question about the preferences on species by the user, and Ole already that the softwood species make up the vast majority. Then maybe there are questions about the wood pellet prices, and that's a good point also to discuss here. That was our one major concern about the data quality. The wood pellet prices are collected by the different different entities. In France, it's statistics which are collecting wood pellet prices. In Austria and Germany, it's wood pellet associations, and Italy also. And the point is that these prices are not collected in a harmonized manner yet. It would be interesting to develop a harmonized way of collecting these prices, or actually have some official collection point of this wood pellet prices in the future. Wood pellet prices on a monthly basis. So it cannot really be said if these are free on board or CIF type of values, because they are actually collected, as I said, from in a more closed environment. Then, if anybody wants to add something to that, Michael, Patrick, Ole, Lucas, or should we move on to the next comment and question? So, about the report, yeah.
Or maybe this. I found this question also interesting regarding other measures to mitigate local regional supply shortages, and I wasn't sure whether I interpreted the question correctly, but as far as I understood, Fabian, you also found out differences between countries regarding storage patterns, and these different storage patterns also, I think, have an impact on how the price reacts, also on a seasonal basis. So I think so storage in Austria is usually different to what to the storage of these small scale pellet consumers in Italy. Maybe you want to add a few words on that?
That was an interesting point. We especially found out discussing with Michael here. So the Italian consumer market was actually more or less defined as a market which some years ago, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, that during the winters or during the cold periods, suddenly the market rushed in and tried to buy as many pellets from the surrounding countries, also of Austria, and to supply the consumers in Italy, which are mainly small pellet consumers with small stoves, and they buy their pellets in sacks of 15 kilograms packages and transport it mostly with the car home to their stoves, which is completely different than what you see in Austria, for example. In Austria, here we have a lot of pellet boilers, which are bigger in size and already have some 6 tons of storage down there in the cellar of the single houses which are using these boilers. So in this case, in Austria, there are coming the cars, bringing the pellets and pumping it into the 6 tons storages in the cellar. But what happens in this Italian market, where you could actually expect every winter now to the traders to rush in and buy as many pellets as possible to supply the pellet consumers in need, which don't have this capability of storing over the whole season, as for example in Austria, as discussed right now. The pellet traders apparently build up storages and start now stocking the pellets in the warm period when the pellet prices are lower. So this is a change in the consumption in the market, which is definitely some mitigation measurement from the pellet traders, or from the traders which try to get as much arbitrage as possible out of that. And in the end, these storages are actually important in the commodity market, and there are still problems to building more storages because of how to finance it and so on. But storages are definitely a good point where we can make the commodity market more resilient. And that is not only a point where we have to think about how to finance the storages, but for example also how we could maybe make the pellets more resistant to self-heating. Somebody wants to add something to that?
Yeah, if you permit me, Michael Wild speaking here. I mean, just briefly to wrap up what you were saying, Fabian. I mean, basically there is a difference in Austria or even in Central Europe and parts of Northern Europe. The customer is keeping the stockpile in a volume of 2 to 5 tons, while in the typical stove markets like Italy, Greece, or in France, the customer is not keeping a stockpile. The customer is just buying when needing the pellets. So in the earlier days of the pellet market, there was always a rush to the do-it-yourself markets in winter, and the do-it-yourself markets who haven't had a stockpile themselves rushed to the producers in Austria or wheresoever, and the prices became very or more volatile by this than they are now. The changes were caused by, first of all, these price volatilities and the realization by some Italian traders that they can make arbitrage money by buying cheap in summer and selling more expensive in winter. And secondly, because of the cheap availability of money. So for a stockpile finance with guarantees, the banks are really willing to supply with relatively cheap money in respect to what it was before. However, shortages do not really exist in the pellet market as such. We have no shortages, we have really overcapacities at the moment. It's just a question of what prices certain markets are willing to pay, and if logistics have to be organized under rush, they will drive up the prices significantly sometimes, and so this will accelerate the changes or the volatility in pricing at certain moments in time. Building stockpiles or storages with wood pellets as they are at the moment is a little bit a dangerous thing for the party keeping the stockpile, not only because of eventual off-gassing. Pellet storage is also a process where you're reducing the quality of the pellets, or you are in danger to reduce the quality of the pellets, and you lose some weight because of the off-gassing. So stockpiling of whitewood pellets for the time being is not the best of all businesses, let's put it like this. This will change if the market for black pellets is developed well, because black pellets do not tend to off-gassing unless they are heated higher than 168 centigrades. And they will not ferment or be exposed to any other development natural material like wood in wood pellets is exposed to, because torrefied material or hydrocarbonized material is literally organically dead. So therefore, I think the real arbitrage through keeping stockpiles is not taking place right now, but this is ahead, when also the products which will hit the market will be further developed. And for the party who is operating the stockpile, there is a less risk, less economic and less physical risk than we see in today's whitewood pellet market. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, so please, everybody feel free to ask more questions. I think we will have time to answer them all. And thank you, Ole, for already pre-answering some of them. So there was also a question about more questions about the prices data. Yes, they include the delivery. For in most of the countries, it's already included in the price we got. For Austria, we assumed a delivery rate. Then the report, there is a summary right now public, so you can actually click on the link on the fourth slide and find the summary on the homepage. Right now, there is under review the journal paper. We will first publish in the journal and then make the public report on the IEA Task 40 homepage available. And it's also going to be part of my dissertation, which is most likely published before the public report on the homepage. So then, well, there's no more questions. Please feel free to answer more or comment.
So I think there is another question here. The storage strategies putting smaller producers at risk of being left out of market? I think this refers to the discussion that we had before between what you said, Fabian, and also Michael, what you argued of different.
No, I mean smaller producers mostly have local markets and local off-takers, and smaller producers are sometimes also regarded as preferred suppliers in local markets. Wood pellets, also we are discussing here about commodity status, in many regions of Europe still have a very particular status, and the buyers or the local consumers would rather pay 1, 2, 3 or 4 euros more per ton if they know that the pellet is produced in a neighboring village than the pellets are imported from the US. So this is still, to a certain extent, it will always remain an ideologically oriented market in certain areas and for certain layers of the market. And those markets, or these market layers, they will be supplied by the smaller producers, so they will be somehow protected by this situation.
Thank you, Michael. I think for the question of guest number 4, what we meant before with smaller producers being left out of the market, this is a danger which we see in the convergence of the smaller and the bigger pellet markets, which is nothing we want to actually something we want to see, because the market would become more efficient, but still it would be an important task to look after the smaller producers to actually not lose capacity here. As Michael said before, there is no shortages right now in the wood pellet market, but we see it in a more altogether in a more generalized way, and also for the future commodity market, this is still an important part to think about. We don't want to produce any shortages here by becoming more efficient. Well, I don't find any more questions, and there is still quite some time left. So if there are comments, you're also welcome to comment on everything and put in your point of view.
And Lucas, and if not, I also would say, thanks, Fabian, once again to this presentation, and also answering the request. Are there some closing remarks from the co-authors or Ronnie?
I think we have a couple more questions coming in.
Right.
Yeah.
What is the reason for softwood to be used as main feedstock for pellets? Yeah, this refers again to the question we had before on the species. So I from my point of view, one one reason is, of course, I think the structure of the saw industry and the species used in the saw industry and the resulting saw residues, where softwood plays a stronger role, in particular for material used in the construction sector. That would be my response here. I don't know whether somebody would like to add response here. Patrick, Ulle, do you?
Yeah, this is Patrick. I think prices play a large role as well. Certainly for the United States, we have a larger hardwood industry in the Northeast, in the New England states, and the mobilization cost for hardwood in these states is much higher than for softwood, particularly in the southeastern United States. Hardwood also grows slower than softwood, so if you own or operate a plantation, you'd have more of that material available sooner at a lower price. And I think we should make very clear that in all these cases, the wood that is used, if it's not a residual material coming out of processing from a sawmill or a pulp mill or a harvesting operation, it is typically thinnings and cheaper materials that find their way into the pellet market, and it's not roundwood. It's not roundwood like a sawmill log.
And if I also might briefly contribute, I mean, as said, wood pellets are mostly done from byproducts, and the softwood industry, timber industry, is much bigger than the hardwood ones. That is one of the reasons, but the other reason is also the quality of the product. The hardwood as such simply contains more minerals, has therefore a higher ash content, and the more ash a pellet contains, the more difficult it is to be used, especially in smaller appliances. So if you look into the standards, you see differences in mostly the ash content and the durability parameter between the A1 category, which is the best for household, and for instance an I2 industrial quality. With hardwood, it is extremely difficult to fulfill the requirements of A1 standard. Thanks.
Yeah, I think this is also exactly the aspect that guest 4 contributed in the chat box here. So the quality aspect, of course. Yeah, I think then we had also this question on the torrefied pellets. Thanks, Ole. You already responded to that, so we did not cover the torrefied pellets, and I think the main reason is just the volumes and the market size.
Still, I guess there is definitely all the lessons learned for development of other commoditization markets in general, and for the black wood pellet market in specific. Thanks for the question. Maybe we will add a sentence to that in the report. Yeah, and also thanks, Ole, for providing all the links. You're always faster than me. I also thought about it, but every time that I thought about it, you already put the link here. Yeah, so I see that some attendees are still typing, and we might have a few more minutes if there are still questions. The list of participants, I would like to forward the question to Natasha and Ronnie.
I'm not exactly sure where guest 4 is calling from, but we will provide a list of participants to the coordinators, and then Fabian and I guess the co-authors if you guys are looking for that information.
Thank you. Thank you also everybody for listening. That it was very great to present in front of this big, nice audience. Guest 4 is the Gaston Danakor and Akfor. Very nice. Thank you very much for your participation, Gaston. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. I guess that was it, and I'm looking forward to welcome you to the next upcoming presentations, which are not yet scheduled, but and maybe give the word back to Ronnie.
All right, so I guess thank you all very much for participating once again, and thank you to all the presenters, co-authors, and everyone. So this was the IEA Bioenergy Webinar Series hosted by the Canadian Institute of Forestry, and we hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are.